The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to administrative protocols ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual bureaucratic precision, describing what scholars have termed divine territorial governance. These tablets, dating to approximately 2100 to 1900 BC, represent detailed administrative records that treat divine beings not as mythological abstractions, but as functioning government officials with specific jurisdictions, resource allocations, and reporting hierarchies. The most significant of these tablets, designated CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains accounting records written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary religious hymns or creation myths. The text begins with standard administrative headers specifying dates, witnesses, and territorial boundaries, but quickly reveals a complex organizational structure governing divine oversight of human territories. What makes these documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact tone, employing the same bureaucratic language found in grain distribution records and labor allocation texts, suggesting the Sumerians viewed divine governance as a practical administrative reality rather than abstract theological concept. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports the functional interpretation of these administrative texts. Excavations in the temple precinct revealed extensive archives containing thousands of economic and administrative documents stored alongside the divine governance tablets, indicating these texts were processed through the same record-keeping systems used for mundane governmental functions. The evidence we are about to examine spans archaeological discoveries across Mesopotamia, linguistic analysis of administrative terminology, architectural layouts reflecting territorial divisions, and cross-cultural parallels suggesting this governance model influenced civilizations far beyond the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. The archaeological context of the Nippur tablets reveals an administrative sophistication that challenges conventional interpretations of Sumerian religion as primitive mythology. Excavations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900 uncovered over 30,000 cuneiform tablets within the Ekur temple complex, with approximately 8% containing references to divine administrative functions that mirror contemporary governmental structures. These tablets were not stored in sacred repositories, isolated from mundane records, but were instead filed systematically within the same archival chambers that housed grain receipts, labour contracts, and trade agreements, suggesting the Sumerians made no categorical distinction between divine and human administrative oversight. The physical organisation of the Nippur archives demonstrates this integrated approach to divine and mundane administration. Archaeologist John Punnett Peters, who directed the initial University of Pennsylvania expeditions, documented that tablets describing Anunnaki territorial jurisdiction were filed alongside economic documents recording barley distributions and labour assignments. The filing system employed a sophisticated cataloguing method that organised documents by administrative function, rather than religious versus secular categories. Tablets dealing with water rights, for example, included both human property disputes and references to divine authority over irrigation systems, filed together in the same clay tablet containers sealed with administrative stamps identical to those used for purely economic records. Hermann Hilprecht, who supervised the tablet processing and initial translation work at Nippur, noted the bureaucratic precision of documents describing divine administrative activities. His detailed cataloguing work revealed that approximately 2,400 tablets contained references to Anunnaki oversight of human affairs, employing terminology identical to that used in contemporary governmental documents. Terms like Masaru, meaning inspector or overseer, and Sheikhin, indicating appointed governor, appeared in both divine and human administrative contexts, with no linguistic distinction suggesting these were metaphorical rather than functional descriptions. The consistency of this administrative vocabulary across thousands of tablets spanning several centuries indicates the Sumerians conceptualized divine governance as operating through the same bureaucratic mechanisms that structured human government. Chemical analysis of clay tablets from different archive chambers conducted by modern researchers has confirmed they were produced during the same time periods, using identical clay sources and manufacturing techniques. This indicates divine administrative documents were created through the same official scribble processes as mundane governmental records rather than being produced separately by religious personnel. The uniform tablet dimensions, consistent cuneiform style, and identical seal impressions demonstrate these documents moved through standardized bureaucratic procedures regardless of whether they documented human or divine administrative activities. Archaeological evidence from the scribble quarter adjacent to the Ekur complex reveals writing schools where trainee scribes practiced copying both religious texts and administrative documents. Learning to employ identical grammatical structures and formulaic expressions for describing governmental functions in both divine and human contexts. The tablets contain extensive cross-referencing systems that linked divine administrative directives to specific human implementation procedures. Document CBS 10,673, for instance, records a dispute over water allocation between two agricultural estates, with the resolution explicitly referencing divine territorial boundaries established by Enlil and requiring verification through consultation of master survey documents maintained in the central archives. This cross-referencing demonstrates that divine administrative frameworks were not abstract theological concepts, but functioned as legally binding precedents that determined property rights, resource allocations, and jurisdictional authority in practical disputes. The tablets describe specific procedures for consulting divine administrative records when resolving human conflicts, including requirements for authorized scribal access, witness verification, and official seal authentication that match exactly the protocols used for consulting purely human governmental precedents. Sumerian administrative texts describe a precise territorial division of Mesopotamia among three primary Anunnaki administrators. 4. With boundaries defined using the same surveying terminology found in property deeds and agricultural land assessments. Tablet VAT 17,042 from the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin provides the most detailed cartographic description, specifying that Anu maintained jurisdiction over northern mountainous regions extending from modern Turkey through the Caucasus. Enlil governed central Mesopotamian plains encompassing the heartland between the Tigris and Euphrates, and Enki administered southern marshlands and coastal regions adjacent to the Persian Gulf. These territorial assignments were not arbitrary religious associations, but functioned as genuine administrative districts with defined borders, resource allocation systems, and population management protocols. The precision of these territorial descriptions rivals contemporary land survey documents. Tablet VAT 17,042 employs standard Sumerian measurement units, including the nindan, approximately 6 meters, and the bur, roughly 6.3 hectares, to specify exact boundaries between divine jurisdictions. The northern border of Enlil's territory is described as extending from the confluence of the Tigris and Lower Zab rivers eastward following the ridgeline of the Jebel Hamrin Mountains for a distance of 340 nindan, then turning northward along the eastern bank of the Tigris for 2,100 nindan, until reaching the territory administered by Anu. These boundary descriptions include reference markers such as specific temples, mountain peaks, and river fords that enabled precise territorial demarcation, using the same surveying techniques employed for establishing property boundaries between human landowners. Archaeological evidence supports the functional reality of these territorial divisions through distinctive architectural styles and administrative practices that correspond to the documented divine jurisdictions. Excavations at sites within Anu's northern territory, including Göbekli Tepe and Navali Kori, reveal construction techniques and architectural layouts that differ systematically from sites within Enlil's Central Plains region, such as Nippur and Uruk. The northern sites employ massive stone construction with T-shaped pillars and intricate carved reliefs, while central Mesopotamian sites utilize mud brick construction with standardized temple layouts featuring central courtyards and peripheral chambers. These architectural distinctions align precisely with the territorial boundaries described in the administrative texts, suggesting that different divine administrators implemented distinct building codes and architectural standards within their respective jurisdictions. Administrative tablets from multiple sites document the practical implications of these territorial divisions for human populations. Tablet CBS 16,791 from Nippur records a legal dispute involving a merchant who transported goods from Eridu in Enki's southern territory through Nippur in Enlil's central region to Asher in Anu's northern domain. The document specifies different customs duties, travel permits, and commercial regulations applicable in each territory, requiring the merchant to obtain separate authorizations from officials representing each divine administrator. The tablet describes specific customs stations at territorial boundaries where inspections occurred and duties were collected, with revenues allocated according to which divine jurisdiction had authority over the particular border crossing. This systematic revenue allocation and the existence of permanent customs infrastructure demonstrates that territorial divisions functioned as genuine administrative boundaries affecting commerce, taxation, and legal jurisdiction. The territorial system included mechanisms for resolving boundary disputes and managing shared resources that crossed jurisdictional lines. Tablet VAT 13,579 documents negotiations between representatives of Enlil and Enki regarding management of marshlands at the boundary between their territories. The text describes formal diplomatic protocols including appointment of authorized negotiators, establishment of neutral meeting locations, presentation of survey evidence documenting historical boundary markers, and arbitration procedures for resolving conflicting territorial claims. These dispute resolution mechanisms operated according to established legal principles requiring documentary evidence, witness testimony, and formal ratification of negotiated settlements through sealed agreements deposited in central archives accessible to both parties. Economic tablets from Gyesu dating to the 3rd dynasty of Ur reveal that divine territorial administration involves sophisticated resource management systems, requiring detailed accounting of agricultural production, mineral extraction, and labour allocation across vast geographical areas. Administrative text RTC 436 describes tribute requirements for each divine territory, specifying annual quotas of barley, dates, wool, and precious metals that were collected, processed, and redistributed through temple complexes functioning as both religious centres and economic administrative hubs. The precision of these economic records, including fractional accounting methods and compound interest calculations, demonstrates that divine governance operated according to practical economic principles rather than symbolic religious abstraction. The tribute requirements documented in RTC 436 reveal a sophisticated understanding of agricultural productivity variations across different ecological zones. The text specifies that territories under Enki's southern administration were assessed 12,000 gur of barley annually, approximately 3,600,000 litres, while Enlil's central territories were required to provide 18,000 gur, and Anu's northern regions contributed 6,000 gur. These differential assessments correspond precisely to variations in agricultural potential across different geographical regions, demonstrating that tribute quotas were calculated based on actual productive capacity rather than arbitrary religious symbolism. The tablet includes detailed calculations showing how total tribute requirements were determined by multiplying standardized yield estimates per unit of cultivated land by the total agricultural acreage within each territory, using computational methods identical to those employed in contemporary tax assessment procedures. The economic documents describe complex redistribution systems that transferred resources between territories based on seasonal variations and regional specializations. Tablet Ashram, 1913, 914 records transfers of 50 tons of copper ore from Anu's northern mining regions to Enki's southern workshops, where specialized metallurgists processed the raw materials into finished bronze implements. The document specifies transportation logistics, including the number of boats required, estimated travel time of 14 days downstream via the Tigris and Euphrates river system, and security provisions including armed escorts to protect valuable cargo. Returned shipments from Enki's territory included processed bronze tools, dried fish from Persian Gulf fisheries, and woven textiles manufactured in southern workshops, demonstrating economic integration that enabled regional specialization and efficient resource utilization across the entire administrative network. Temple archives from Lagash contain thousands of economic tablets documenting the administrative infrastructure required to manage these resource flows. The tablets describe warehouse complexes with storage capacity exceeding 100,000 cubic meters, staffed by permanent personnel including inventory managers, quality inspectors, and security guards who maintained detailed records of all incoming and outgoing materials. The precision of these inventory systems included individual identification numbers for stored containers, regular physical audits comparing documented quantities against actual inventories, and accountability procedures that assigned personal responsibility to specific officials for any discrepancies. Modern accounting principles including double-entry bookkeeping, periodic financial reporting, and independent auditing procedures appear throughout these economic documents, demonstrating administrative sophistication comparable to contemporary business organizations. The economic texts reveal that temple complexes functioned as central banks managing currency systems and credit arrangements that facilitated commerce across territorial boundaries. Tablets from describe standardized silver ingots serving as currency, with guaranteed weight and purity, verified through official assay procedures and stamp authentication. Temple officials issued letters of credit, allowing merchants to conduct transactions without transporting physical currency, maintaining accounts that tracked debits and credits across multiple transactions, and settling balances periodically through transfers between temple treasurers. Interest rates for commercial loans were standardized at 20% annually for barley loans and 33.3% for silver loans, with detailed contractual terms specifying repayment schedules, collateral requirements, and default penalties that provided the legal framework for credit markets spanning multiple divine territories. Cuneiform texts from multiple sites describe a hierarchical council structure governing Anunnaki administrative operations with specific titles, responsibilities, and reporting relationships that mirror contemporary bureaucratic organizations. Tablet CBS 13,294 details the organizational chart of this divine bureaucracy, identifying 50 primary Anunnaki officials who held administrative authority over human populations, supported by 300 secondary administrators called Igigi, who managed day-to-day operational functions. The text describes regular council meetings held at Nippur's Ekur complex where policy decisions were debated, resource allocations determined, and disputes between territorial administrators resolved through formal procedures involving testimony, evidence presentation, and majority voting. The council structure described in CBS 13,294 includes specific portfolios assigned to individual Anunnaki officials responsible for discrete governmental functions. Ninurta held the agriculture and irrigation portfolio, maintaining oversight of water management systems, crop selection policies, and agricultural productivity standards across all territories. Ninhursag administered the health and population portfolio, establishing medical standards, training healthcare practitioners, and implementing public health measures, including quarantine procedures for epidemic diseases. Ningishzida managed the education and knowledge portfolio, supervising Skripal schools, authorizing curriculum content, and regulating the dissemination of specialized technical knowledge. This functional specialization enabled efficient administration by concentrating expertise in specific domains while maintaining coordination through the council deliberation process. Council meeting procedures described in administrative text from Nippur demonstrate sophisticated organizational protocols. Tablet VAT 21089 specifies that council sessions required attendance by at least 35 of the 50 primary officials to achieve quorum for conducting official business. The text describes formal agenda procedures requiring advance notice of topics to be discussed, allowing officials to prepare presentations and gather supporting documentation. Debates followed structured formats, allocating equal speaking time to proponents and opponents of proposed policies, with the presiding official, typically Enlil in his capacity as council chairman, responsible for maintaining order and ensuring all perspectives received fair consideration. Decisions required majority support from attending officials, with vote tallies recorded in official minutes deposited in the central archives. The administrative hierarchy extended beyond the primary council to include the 300 Igigi officials who implemented policies established by the council and managed routine operational functions. Tablet K 8745 from the British Museum describes the Igigi organisational structure as comprising regional supervisors, each responsible for oversight of specific geographical districts within the larger territorial jurisdictions. These regional supervisors maintained permanent administrative centres staffed by human scribes, accountants, and clerks who processed routine transactions, maintained local records, and reported regularly to their Igigi supervisors. The hierarchical structure enabled delegation of routine functions while maintaining centralized control over policy decisions and strategic resource allocations through the council deliberation process. Communication systems connecting council officials with regional supervisors involve sophisticated information management infrastructure. Administrative tablets describe regular courier services operating on fixed schedules between Nippur's central council chambers and regional administrative centres throughout Mesopotamia. Couriers transported sealed dispatches containing policy directives, resource allocation decisions, and requests for information, with documented delivery times suggesting the courier network could transmit messages between Nippur and a distance of approximately 160 kilometers, within 3 days. The tablets describe standardized message formats using coded language and authorized seals that authenticated official communications and prevented unauthorized access to sensitive administrative information. The Code of Hammurabi and earlier Sumerian legal collections preserve references to divine legislative authority that established legal frameworks governing both divine and human conduct. Tablet CBS 11,987 contains what appears to be procedural rules for Anunnaki council deliberations, specifying quorum requirements, voting procedures, and protocols for amending existing divine decrees. These legislative procedures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of legal principles, including presumption of innocence, burden of proof requirements, and appellate review processes, suggesting the Anunnaki operated according to formal legal codes rather than arbitrary divine whim. The legislative framework documented in CBS 11,987 includes constitutional provisions limiting the authority of individual administrators and requiring collective approval for major policy changes. The text specifies that no single Anunnaki official, including territorial administrators Anu, Enlil, and Enki, possessed unilateral authority to modify existing legal codes or impose new regulations without council approval. Proposed legislative changes required presentation of detailed justification, including analysis of existing problems, explanation of how proposed modifications would address identified deficiencies, and assessment of potential unintended consequences. This requirement for reasoned justification and collective deliberation created checks and balances that prevented arbitrary rule changes and ensured legal stability across the administrative system. The legal texts describe elaborate procedures for investigating alleged violations of divine regulations by either Anunnaki administrators or human subjects. Tablet VAT 19,042 details. Investigative protocols requiring appointment of neutral fact-finders who gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared comprehensive reports documenting their findings. The accused parties, whether divine officials or humans, possessed rights to review evidence against them, present contradictory evidence and witnesses, and argue for alternative interpretations of disputed facts. These procedural protections ensured that legal determinations were based on established evidence rather than arbitrary accusations or political considerations, creating justice systems that operated according to consistent legal principles. Appellate review procedures enabled challenges to decisions made by lower-level administrators or regional councils. The texts describe a hierarchical judicial structure where disputes initially resolved at regional levels could be appealed to territorial administrators and ultimately to the Central Council at Nippur. Tablet CBS 17,329 documents, specific criteria for accepting appeals, including requirements that appellants demonstrate either procedural errors in lower proceedings or new evidence not available during initial hearings. Successful appeals resulted in case remands for reconsideration or direct reversal of lower decisions, creating accountability mechanisms that encouraged fair and consistent application of legal principles throughout the administrative hierarchy. The sophistication of these appellate procedures and their systematic application across diverse cases demonstrates that Anunnaki governance operated according to formal legal frameworks comparable to modern judicial systems. Sumerian administrative texts contain extensive documentation of mining operations conducted under direct Anunnaki supervision, with particular emphasis on precious metal extraction from mountainous regions under Anu's northern jurisdiction. Tablet VAT 21,089 describes detailed mining protocols including labour allocation methods, ore processing techniques, and quality control standards for extracted materials. The text specifies that gold mining operations in the Taurus Mountains employed rotating labour forces of 3,000 workers, supervised by Igigi administrators who maintained production quotas, safety standards, and material accountability systems remarkably similar to modern industrial management practices. The mining protocols documented in VAT 21,089 reveal sophisticated understanding of geological principles and mineral extraction techniques that exceed conventional expectations for Bronze Age technology. The tablet describes systematic surveying methods for identifying productive ore deposits, including surface indicators such as specific rock colorations, vegetation patterns, and water characteristics that correlate with subsurface mineral concentrations. Mining supervisors employed what the text terms earth-reading specialists who analyze geological formations to predict optimal excavation locations, achieving success rates that suggest genuine technical expertise rather than random prospecting. The document specifies that survey teams marked promising locations using standardized stone cairns, inscribed with uniform symbols indicating estimated ore quality and projected extraction volumes, creating permanent records that guided subsequent mining operations. Labour allocation systems for mining operations incorporated rotation schedules that balanced productivity requirements against worker health considerations. Administrative tablets from the Ur III period describe standard work assignments of 10-day shifts, followed by 5-day rest periods, allowing workers to recover from the physical demands of underground excavation. The texts specify different labour categories based on specialised skills, with experienced miners receiving higher compensation and supervisory authority over unskilled labourers who performed basic extraction and transportation tasks. Tablet Asham, 1913. 915 documents compensation rates of 60 litres of barley per month for basic labourers, 90 litres for skilled miners, and 120 litres plus supplementary rations for mining supervisors, creating incentive structures that encourage skill development and promoted workforce stability. Safety regulations described in mining administration documents demonstrate concern for worker welfare that transcends purely economic considerations. The texts specify mandatory ventilation requirements for underground workings, achieved through vertical shafts positioned at regular intervals to maintain air circulation in excavation tunnels. Mining supervisors were required to conduct daily inspections of timber supports reinforcing tunnel walls and ceilings, with documented procedures for evacuating workers and suspending operations when structural integrity became compromised. Tablet K 9876 records disciplinary actions against a mining supervisor who failed to maintain adequate safety standards, resulting in a tunnel collapse that killed 11 workers. The supervisor was stripped of his position, required to compensate victims' families with silver payments totaling 3 mina, approximately 1.5 kilograms, and permanently barred from supervisory roles. Demonstrating that administrative accountability extended to safety performance. All processing techniques documented in the mining texts reveal sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. The tablets describe multi-stage refining procedures that began with mechanical crushing of ore-bearing rock using stone hammers and grinding wheels, followed by washing processes that separated heavy metallic particles from lighter waste materials. The concentrated ore underwent smelting in specialized furnaces, constructed from fire-resistant clay bricks and capable of reaching temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius through forced air systems using bellows operated by dedicated furnace crews. Quality control procedures required assaying of processed metals to verify purity standards, with samples tested through specific gravity measurements and fire assay techniques that determined precise gold content. Mining operations that consistently failed to meet established purity standards of 95% gold content face production penalties and supervisory replacements, ensuring quality maintenance across all extraction facilities. Material accountability systems tracked precious metals from initial extraction through final delivery to central treasuries with precision that prevented theft and ensured accurate inventory records. Each mining operation maintained daily production logs, recording quantities of ore extracted, processed, and refined, with supervisors personally responsible for any discrepancies between documented and actual outputs. Finished metals were cast into standardized ingots, bearing official stamps identifying the producing mine, supervising official, and verified weight. Transportation to central collection points occurred under armed escort with multiple witnesses documenting transfers at each stage, creating audit trails that enabled tracking of specific ingots from production sites to final destinations. Annual production reports compiled at Nippur's central archives aggregated data from all mining operations, providing comprehensive accountability for total resource extraction across Anu's northern territories. The Farmer's Almanac, preserved in Sumerian agricultural texts, demonstrates centralized planning systems for food production that coordinated planting schedules, irrigation management and harvest procedures across multiple regions under different Anunnaki territorial jurisdictions. Tablet CBS 5876 provides specific agricultural instructions attributed to Ninurta, described as the divine administrator responsible for agricultural productivity, including optimal planting dates based on astronomical observations, soil preparation methods, and pest control techniques. The sophistication of these agricultural protocols and their successful implementation across vast territories suggests advanced understanding of agronomic principles and centralized coordination capabilities. The agricultural instructions in CBS 5876 demonstrate detailed knowledge of crop requirements and environmental factors affecting productivity. The text specifies that barley planting should commence when the constellation known as the Stars of Cultivation rises at dawn, corresponding to mid-October in modern calendrical terms, with seeding rates of 120 litres per burr of land, approximately 19 litres per hectare. The tablet provides soil preparation guidelines requiring ploughing to depths of 18 fingers, approximately 30 centimetres, followed by harrowing to break clumps and create fine seed beds. Irrigation schedules specify water applications at 14-day intervals during the growing season, with adjustments based on rainfall patterns and soil moisture conditions observed through regular field inspections. These precise agricultural specifications demonstrate understanding of crop physiology and environmental interactions that enabled consistent high yields across diverse growing conditions. Pest control techniques described in agricultural texts reveal sophisticated integrated management approaches. The Farmer's Almanac documents biological control methods, including encouraging beneficial birds that consumed insect pests, achieved through maintaining nesting sites near agricultural fields and prohibiting hunting of specific bird species during crop growing seasons. The texts describe botanical pesticides prepared from bitter plant extracts, sulfur compounds, and aromatic oils that deterred insect feeding without harming crops or beneficial organisms. Application timing coordinated with pest life cycles to maximize effectiveness, with instructions specifying treatment during early growth stages when pest populations were establishing but before reaching damaging levels. These integrated pest management strategies demonstrate ecological understanding that recognize complex interactions between crops, pests, and beneficial organisms. Irrigation management systems described in administrative texts from Lagash reveal sophisticated hydraulic engineering coordinating water distribution across vast agricultural regions. Temple archives document canal networks totaling over 3,000 kilometers in length within Enlil's central territories alone, with main channels drawing water from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers distributed through progressively smaller secondary and tertiary canals reaching individual fields. Water allocation followed predetermined schedules, rotating access among different agricultural districts, ensuring equitable distribution during periods of limited water availability. Tablet R TC 523 describes water allocation disputes resolved through reference to official distribution schedules maintained in temple archives, demonstrating that irrigation management operated according to established legal frameworks rather than arbitrary local decisions. The agricultural administration employed specialized personnel maintaining the irrigation infrastructure and ensuring compliance with water allocation protocols. Tablets from UMA document positions, including canal inspectors responsible for monitoring water flow rates and identifying maintenance requirements, gatekeepers who controlled distribution through canal regulation gates according to approved schedules, and arbitration officials who resolved disputes between farmers competing for limited water resources. These specialized roles created bureaucratic structures capable of managing complex hydraulic systems, serving hundreds of thousands of hectares of irrigated agriculture. Annual maintenance programs organized through temple administration mobilized labor forces numbering tens of thousands of workers who cleared silt accumulation from canal bottoms, repaired earthen embankments, and reconstructed damaged control structures, ensuring irrigation system functionality across agricultural seasons. Harvest procedures described in agricultural texts demonstrate centralized coordination, matching crop maturation timing with available labor resources. The tablets specify that barley harvesting should commence when grain moisture content reaches optimal levels for efficient threshing, typically occurring in late April or early May. Administrative documents coordinated labor mobilization across multiple agricultural districts, moving harvest crews systematically through regions as crops reach maturity. Tablet CBS 19,472 records deployment of 2,000 harvest workers to the Nippur agricultural district, organised into crews of 50 workers supervised by experienced team leaders who ensured work quality and productivity standards. Harvested grain underwent immediate threshing and winnowing before transport to storage facilities, minimising field losses and protecting grain quality during the critical post-harvest period. Temple administrative archives from contain detailed records of labour allocation systems that mobilised human workers for construction projects, agricultural operations, and resource extraction activities under divine administrative oversight. Tablet UET 3687 describes workforce management protocols including labour recruitment procedures, skill classification systems, compensation schedules, and disciplinary procedures for workers who failed to meet productivity standards. These labour management systems incorporated sophisticated organisational principles, including division of labour, specialisation, supervision hierarchies, and performance monitoring that enabled coordination of massive projects requiring thousands of workers. Labour recruitment systems described in UET 3687 operated through compulsory service obligations imposed on all adult males within Anunnaki territorial jurisdictions. The text specifies that able-bodied men between ages 18 and 50 were liable for labour service totalling 3 months annually, mobilised according to regional quotas allocated proportionally based on population assessments documented in periodic census records. Temple administrators issued service notices 30 days in advance, specifying reporting locations, required provisions, and expected service duration. Workers who failed to report faced penalties including fines of 30 shekels of silver, approximately 250 grams, or compensatory labour service of double the original obligation. These enforcement mechanisms ensured reliable labour availability for major projects requiring large workforces during specific time periods. Skill classification systems enabled efficient deployment of workers according to their capabilities and project requirements. Administrative tablets document formal assessment procedures evaluating workers' physical capabilities, technical skills, and prior experience to assign appropriate labour categories. Classifications range from unskilled labourers performing basic tasks like earth moving and material transport, to semi-skilled workers capable of specialised functions like brick making and mortar mixing, to skilled craftsmen including carpenters, masons, and metalworkers who executed technically demanding work requiring years of training. Compensation rates varied according to skill classifications, with unskilled workers receiving basic rations of barley and vegetable oil, skilled workers earning supplementary payments of silver or copper, and master craftsmen commanding premium wages plus tool allowances that recognise their specialised expertise. Supervision hierarchies organised large labour forces into manageable units, enabling effective coordination and accountability. The texts describe organisational structures grouping 10 workers under a foreman who directed daily activities and monitored individual performance. 5 foreman units, totalling 50 workers, reported to a gang leader responsible for coordinating activities across his assigned workforce and ensuring productivity targets were met. 10 gang leaders, commanding 500 workers, answered to a construction superintendent who maintained overall project oversight and reported to temple administrators. This hierarchical structure enabled clear command chains, facilitated communication between management and workers, and created accountability mechanisms where supervisors at each level bore responsibility for their subordinates' performance. Performance monitoring systems tracked worker productivity through quantitative metrics, enabling objective assessment of individual and group performance. Tablets from document daily production records for construction projects, specifying cubic meters of earth moved, numbers of bricks laid, or linear meters of wall constructed by each work crew. Supervisors compared actual outputs against established productivity standards, identifying high performers eligible for rewards including bonus rations, preferential work assignments, or early release from service obligations. Workers consistently failing to meet minimum standards face disciplinary actions ranging from reduced rations for minor deficiencies to corporal punishment or extended service terms for serious productivity failures. These performance management systems created incentives encouraging maximum effort while maintaining workforce discipline. Safety and welfare provisions described in labour administration documents demonstrate concern for worker health extending beyond economic efficiency considerations. The texts specify mandatory rest periods including 1 day off per 10-day week and midday breaks during summer months when heat posed health risks. Medical personnel attached to large labour projects provided treatment for work-related injuries and illnesses, with serious cases evacuated to temple infirmaries staffed by trained physicians. Workers who sustained permanent disabilities during labour service received compensation payments supporting them and their families, calculated according to injury severity and lost earning capacity. These welfare provisions created social safety nets protecting workers from catastrophic consequences of labour service, while maintaining moral legitimacy of compulsory mobilisation systems. Mesopotamian administrative texts describe sophisticated communication systems that enabled coordination between different Anunnaki territorial jurisdictions and maintained operational efficiency across vast geographical areas. Tablet VAT 18934 details messenger services operating on regular schedules between major administrative centres, carrying encoded communications that required specialised training to decipher. The text describes signal systems using fire beacons positioned on elevated locations that could transmit basic messages rapidly across distances, supplemented by carrier pigeon networks for more detailed communications, suggesting the Anunnaki established infrastructure for real-time administrative coordination. The messenger service described in VAT 18934 operated through a network of relay stations positioned at approximately 30-kilometre intervals along major routes connecting administrative centres. Each station maintained permanent staff, including 3 messengers ready for immediate dispatch, stable facilities housing horses or donkeys for rapid transport, and provisions enabling messengers to depart without delay. The tablet specifies that urgent messages could traverse the 320 kilometres between Ur and Nineveh within 4 days, averaging 80 kilometres daily, through continuous relay operations where fresh messengers and mounts replaced tired couriers at each station. This sustained communication speed enabled central administrators at Nippur to maintain near real-time awareness of developments throughout the territorial network and issue responsive directives addressing emerging situations. Message security systems protected sensitive communications from interception or unauthorized access through sophisticated encoding methods. Administrative texts describe coded vocabularies where common words and phrases were replaced with arbitrary substitutes known only to authorized personnel. Tablet CBS 22341 contains what appears to be a partial codebook listing official terminology with corresponding code words, organized alphabetically for efficient encoding and decoding operations. The document indicates that code systems were updated periodically with new substitution vocabularies distributed to authorized communications personnel, preventing unauthorized parties from deciphering intercepted messages even if they obtained outdated code keys. Sealed clay envelopes bearing multiple official stamps provided additional security, with tampering evident through broken seals that authenticated message integrity upon delivery. Firebeacon networks described in administrative texts enabled rapid transmission of predetermined signals across vast distances. The tablets document beacon stations positioned on elevated terrain, including hills, mountains and artificial towers, maintained by permanent crews who monitored assigned sectors continuously and stood ready to relay signals within minutes of observation. Standard signals included numeric codes created through combinations of fires and smoke columns visible during day or night, enabling transmission of basic messages including alerts, assembly orders, or situation reports. Tablet K 12,983 records that a warning signal from the northern frontier could reach Nippur, approximately 500 kilometers distant, within 6 hours through successive relay transmission, providing early warning of threats or emergencies requiring immediate response. Carrier pigeon systems supplemented messenger and beacon networks by enabling transmission of written messages without requiring human couriers to traverse entire distances. Administrative documents describe specialized pigeon breeding programs, producing birds capable of flying distances exceeding 300 kilometers to return to home roosts, where messages attached to their legs could be retrieved. Temple complexes maintained extensive pigeon facilities, housing thousands of birds organized by destination locations, enabling dispatching of messages to any major administrative center through selecting appropriately trained birds. The texts specify that pigeon messages employed extremely compact writing on thin copper sheets, weighing less than 10 grams, minimizing flight burdens while ensuring message durability during transport. Though pigeon systems could not match messenger networks for message volume or security, they provided valuable redundancy and enabled communication when ground routes were disrupted. Coordination protocols described in communication text reveal sophisticated procedures ensuring information consistency and preventing confusion from contradictory directives. The tablets specify that all official communications included standardized header information identifying sending authority, date of dispatch, urgency classification, and unique reference numbers enabling tracking and cross-referencing. Recipients acknowledged message receipt by returning confirmation notices documenting delivery date and assigned action responsibilities, creating auditable records of communication flows. Administrative centers maintained message logs, recording all incoming and outgoing communications organized chronologically and by subject matter, enabling administrators to review communication histories and maintain situational awareness across multiple ongoing activities. These standardized procedures created reliable information systems supporting coordinated activities across the dispersed administrative network. The mythological concept of the Tablets of Destinies takes on new significance when examined as documentation of administrative authority transfer procedures within the Anunnaki governance system. Tablet K 3454 from the British Museum describes these tablets not as mystical objects but as official credentials documenting legitimate administrative authority, similar to modern letters of appointment or authorization documents. The text provides detailed protocols for authority transfers, including verification procedures, witness requirements, and ceremonial formalities that legitimize changes in administrative leadership, suggesting the Anunnaki operated according to established bureaucratic succession procedures rather than arbitrary power seizures. The Tablets of Destinies, described in K 3454, consisted of permanent records inscribed on durable materials including lapis lazuli, precious metals, and hard stone, ensuring their physical preservation across extended time periods. The text specifies that each tablet documented the scope of authority granted to specific administrators, including territorial jurisdictions, functional responsibilities, resource allocations, and subordinate personnel under their command. Authorization statements employed standardized legal language explicitly enumerating powers and limitations, creating clear boundaries for legitimate administrative action and preventing authority disputes. The tablets bore multiple official seals, including those of granting authorities, witnessing council members, and archival officials who maintained custody of master copies, providing authentication through redundant verification mechanisms. Authority transfer procedures described in the text required formal council deliberations preceding any leadership changes. Proposed appointments or authority modifications required presentation to the assembled council with detailed justification explaining the necessity for changes and qualifications of proposed appointees. Council members examined candidates' backgrounds, assessed their capabilities for assigned responsibilities, and evaluated potential conflicts with other administrators whose territories or functions might overlap. Approval required majority consent from attending council members, with dissenting officials entitled to record objections in official minutes, documenting the basis for their opposition. These deliberative procedures ensured leadership selections reflected collective judgment rather than individual preferences, and created documented records enabling future administrators to understand the reasoning behind particular appointments. Ceremonial investiture procedures completed authority transfers through public rituals that demonstrated legitimacy to both divine and human audiences. The texts describe elaborate ceremonies conducted at Nippur's Ekur complex, where new administrators received the tablets of destinies from presiding council officials in the presence of assembled witnesses, including other administrators, temple officials, and human representatives from affected territories. The ceremonies included formal recitation of granted authorities and accompanying responsibilities, public oaths binding administrators to faithful execution of their duties, and symbolic presentations including official seals, staffs of office, and ceremonial garments marking their elevated status. These public investitures created shared understanding of administrative transitions and deterred potential challenges by demonstrating broad institutional support for new leadership. Security procedures protected the tablets of destinies from theft or unauthorized possession, recognizing that physical control of these credentials could enable illegitimate claims to administrative authority. The text describes secure storage facilities within Nippur's temple complex, protected by multiple barriers, including locked chambers, armed guards, and magical protective rituals that supposedly deterred unauthorized entry. Access required presence of multiple authorized officials simultaneously, preventing any single individual from obtaining unsupervised possession of the tablets. Periodic inventories verified that all tablets remained in authorized custody, with documented locations and responsible custodians identified in archive records. These security measures reflected understanding that administrative authority ultimately derived from institutional legitimacy rather than mere physical possession of credentials, but that controlling the official documentation nevertheless conferred practical advantages during succession disputes. Historical narratives describing theft of the tablets of destinies, traditionally interpreted as mythological stories, become comprehensible as accounts of bureaucratic succession crises when examined through this administrative framework. The Epic of Anzu describes the bird demon Anzu stealing the tablets of destinies from Enlil, causing chaos until the hero Ninurta recovered them and restored proper order. Interpreted administratively, this narrative likely documents a succession dispute where an unauthorized party seized official credentials attempting to claim illegitimate authority, creating a governmental crisis resolved through military action that restored legitimate leadership and returned official documentation to proper custody. The narrative's emphasis on chaos resulting from the theft and order, restored through recovery, reflects understanding that stable governance required recognized legitimate authority, documented through proper bureaucratic procedures, rather than depending solely on personal power or arbitrary force. Mesopotamian astronomical texts reveal that Anunnaki administrative activities were carefully synchronized with celestial events, using astronomical observations to coordinate policy implementations, resource distributions, and governmental functions across multiple territories. The MUL.APIN astronomical compendium contains administrative calendar systems that specified optimal timing for various governmental activities based on stellar positions, planetary movements, and lunar phases. These astronomical timing systems enabled coordination of activities across vast distances despite limited communication technologies, allowing simultaneous policy implementations and synchronized resource mobilization throughout the entire Anunnaki administrative network. The MUL.APIN compendium compiled during the late 2nd millennium BC, but preserving observations dating back to at least 2000 BC, demonstrates extraordinary astronomical precision that enabled reliable long-term planning. The text catalogues over 66 stars and constellations organised into 3 celestial paths corresponding to the territorial divisions of Anu, Enlil and Enki, creating astronomical frameworks that link celestial observations directly to administrative jurisdictions. Each constellation's heliacal rising, the first appearance above the eastern horizon before sunrise, was precisely documented with corresponding dates, enabling administrators to establish calendrical reference points independent of local variations in lunar calendar systems. The compendium specifies that the constellation known as the Hired Man rises on the 20th day of the 11th month, corresponding to late January in solar calendar terms, providing a fixed astronomical marker for synchronizing administrative activities across all territories. Administrative synchronization protocols described in temple texts from Ekur demonstrate how astronomical timing coordinated governmental functions. Tablet UET 6402 specifies that annual tax assessments commenced uniformly across all territories when the Pleiades star cluster achieved zenith position at midnight, an astronomical event occurring during the spring equinox period. This standardized timing enabled simultaneous implementation of assessment procedures throughout the administrative network, preventing regional disparities that might create competitive disadvantages or enable tax avoidance through geographic arbitrage. The tablet documents coordination procedures requiring regional administrators to complete assessment activities within 30 days following the astronomical trigger, submit compiled data to central archives at Nippur within an additional 15 days, and implement any adjustments to tax rates or collection procedures within 10 days of receiving central directives, creating predictable administrative cycles synchronized across vast geographical areas. Resource distribution schedules employed similar astronomical timing mechanisms. Administrative texts from Lagash describe grain distribution programs activated when specific stellar configurations appeared, ensuring simultaneous availability of food supplies across multiple territories during seasonal periods of agricultural scarcity. Tablet RTC 678 specifies that emergency grain reserves stored in temple warehouses would be released when the constellation the Great One, corresponding to modern Orion, reached meridian position at dawn, an astronomical event occurring during late autumn, when previous year's supplies dwindled before new harvests became available. The astronomical trigger enabled coordinated distribution without requiring advanced communication between dispersed administrative centres, as local officials simply observed identical celestial phenomena and implemented predetermined procedures according to established protocols. Planetary observations documented in mul.apin enabled more sophisticated timing predictions for administrative planning cycles. The text contains detailed records of Venus appearances and disappearances, documenting the planet's synodic cycle of 583.92 days with remarkable precision. Administrative documents reference Venus cycles for timing major policy reviews, military campaigns, and infrastructure projects, using the planet's predictable visibility patterns to establish multi-year planning horizons. Tablet K 3891 from the British Museum describes a major temple reconstruction project initiated during Venus's morning star appearance, planned for completion before the planet's subsequent evening star phase, creating a project timeline of approximately 8 months determined entirely by astronomical observation rather than arbitrary administrative decision. Lunar phase observations provided shorter-term coordination mechanisms for routine administrative activities. The texts describe administrative months beginning with the first visible crescent moon following new moon, creating standardized monthly cycles synchronized automatically across all territories through shared celestial observation. Monthly council meetings at Nippur occurred uniformly on the 15th day of each lunar month, when full moon provided maximum nocturnal illumination, enabling evening sessions after daytime administrative activities concluded. Regional administrators timed their reporting schedules to ensure dispatches arrived at Nippur before these monthly council sessions, creating regular information flow supporting centralized decision-making processes. Eclipse predictions preserved in Mesopotamian astronomical texts demonstrate advanced computational capabilities, enabling long-term planning despite the complex mathematical relationships governing these phenomena. The Saros cycle, an 18-year 11-day period after which eclipse patterns repeat, appears explicitly in administrative astronomical texts with precise calculations, enabling prediction of lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance. Tablet BM 34080 contains eclipse predictions extending over 50 years, providing administrators with advanced knowledge of celestial events that might be interpreted as omens requiring governmental responses. The ability to predict supposedly divine signs enabled administrative control over religious interpretations that might otherwise disrupt governmental operations, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of how astronomical knowledge conferred political authority. Archaeological surveys across Mesopotamia reveal standardized architectural layouts for administrative centers that facilitated consistent governmental operations regardless of geographical location or local cultural variations. Excavations at Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur demonstrate that major temple complexes incorporated identical functional spaces, including record storage archives, administrative offices, economic processing facilities, and communication centers arranged according to standardized floor plans. This architectural standardization enabled efficient administrative operations through familiar spatial organization, facilitated staff transfers between different administrative centers, and ensured consistent record-keeping practices across the entire Anunnaki governance network. The architectural standardization becomes apparent through comparative analysis of temple complexes excavated at multiple sites. The ground plan of the Yana complex at Uruk, excavated by German archaeologists between 1912 and 1913, shows a central courtyard measuring 45 metres by 38 metres, surrounded by peripheral chambers organised into distinct functional zones. Archive rooms positioned along the northern wall featured raised floors protecting stored tablets from moisture damage, thick walls providing thermal insulation, and limited access points enabling security control. Administrative offices occupied the eastern wing with standardized dimensions of 8 metres by 6 metres, sufficient for accommodating a senior administrator, 2 assistant scribes, and storage for active files requiring frequent consultation. Economic processing facilities, including weighing stations, grain storage, and metal workshops, filled the southern section with direct external access, enabling material deliveries without disrupting administrative activities in other complex areas. Virtually identical architectural layouts appear at other major administrative centres, despite differences in local building materials and construction techniques. The temple complex at Eridu, excavated by Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar between 1946 and 1949, demonstrates the same functional organisation, with archive rooms positioned identically along the northern exposure, administrative offices occupying the eastern wing, and economic facilities concentrated in the southern sector. The standardization extends to specific architectural details, including doorway widths of 2.2 meters, enabling passage of standard clay tablet containers, ceiling heights of 4.5 meters, providing adequate air circulation, and window placements providing natural illumination during morning working hours when most administrative activities occurred. These precise dimensional consistencies across multiple sites separated by hundreds of kilometers demonstrate centralized architectural planning rather than independent local development. The standardization facilitated staff mobility between administrative centers by creating familiar working environments regardless of geographical location. Administrative texts document frequent personnel transfers where experienced officials trained at Nippur were deployed to regional centers, bringing standardized procedures and institutional knowledge. Tablet CBS 24,567 records. The transfer of 3 senior administrators from Nippur to noting that they assumed their new duties immediately upon arrival without requiring familiarization periods, enabled by architectural standardization that ensured office layouts, archive organizations, and procedural workflows matched their previous working environments exactly. This personnel mobility distributed expertise throughout the administrative network while maintaining consistency in governmental operations. Archive organization within these standardized facilities followed uniform classification systems enabling cross-site information retrieval. Excavations at multiple temple complexes reveal identical shelving arrangements, organizing tablets by document type, chronological sequence, and subject matter according to standardized schemes. Economic documents occupied designated archive sections organized by fiscal year and transaction type. Legal records were maintained in separate areas catalogued by case type and adjudication date, and administrative correspondence was filed chronologically with cross-reference indices, enabling retrieval by sender, recipient, or subject matter. These uniform filing systems enabled visiting administrators to locate required documents in unfamiliar archives by following the same organizational logic they employed at their home centers, creating administrative efficiency through information system standardization. Communication facilities incorporated into administrative complexes demonstrate sophisticated understanding of coordination requirements. All major centers included elevated platforms or towers, providing sightlines to adjacent beacon stations, enabling participation in the fire beacon network described in earlier administrative texts. Tablet storage areas positioned adjacent to communication facilities enabled rapid document access when composing messages or verifying information, minimizing delays in responding to urgent inquiries. Dedicated scribal stations equipped with clay preparation facilities, stylus storage, and reference materials supported immediate message composition and dispatch, ensuring communication capabilities could support administrative operations without bottlenecks during high-volume periods. Administrative texts from the Ur 3-period document sophisticated census systems that tracked human populations under Anunnaki jurisdiction with precision comparable to modern demographic surveys. Tablet Asham 1913 914 contains census data organized by territorial divisions, recording population counts, age distributions, occupational classifications, and property ownership information for specific administrative districts. These census systems enabled accurate labor force planning, tax assessment, resource allocation, and military conscription, demonstrating that Anunnaki territorial governance required detailed population information for effective administrative operations. The census procedures described in administrative texts employed systematic enumeration methods, ensuring comprehensive population coverage. Tablet Asham 1913 914 documents census operations conducted in the Umma district during the 41st year of Shulgi's reign, approximately 2047 BC. The text specifies that census officials visited every household within designated enumeration districts, recording names, ages, gender, and relationship to household head for all residents. Officials marked enumerated households with clay tokens bearing official seals, preventing duplicate counting while enabling verification that all households received census visits. The enumeration process required 3 months to cover the entire Umma district, employing 48 census officials who each processed approximately 400 households, suggesting the district's total population exceeded 19,000 individuals, organized into approximately 8,000 households. Age distributions recorded in census documents reveal demographic structures enabling labor force planning and resource allocation. The texts categorize populations into standardized age groups including children under 12 years, adolescents between 12 and 18 years, adults from 18 to 50 years, and elderly individuals above 50 years. Adult population counts enabled calculation of available labor for compulsory service obligations, agricultural operations, and military conscription. The census documents from Umma recorded 3,200 adult males eligible for labour service, 2,800 adult females available for textile production and agricultural support activities, and 1,400 elderly individuals requiring support from extended families or temple welfare programs. These demographic profiles enabled administrators to assess labour availability, plan resource requirements, and forecast future population trends affecting long-term governmental planning. Occupational classifications documented in census records enabled skills-based labour allocation, matching workers with appropriate assignments. The texts distinguish between agricultural workers constituting approximately 65% of adult males, artisans and craftsmen representing 20%, merchants and traders comprising 8%, temple and governmental personnel accounting for 5%, and soldiers and security forces totaling 2%. Detailed subcategories identified specific skills including metalworkers, carpenters, weavers, scribes, and numerous other specializations, creating comprehensive databases of available expertise. Census officials verified occupational claims through guild registrations and master craftsman certifications, ensuring classification accuracy essential for effective labour mobilization. Property ownership information recorded in census documents enabled tax assessments based on wealth and productive capacity. The tablets document landholdings measured in Burr units, livestock counted by type and age categories, and movable property including tools, furnishings, and precious metals. A typical agricultural household in the Umma census owned approximately 3 burr of land equivalent to 18.9 hectares, maintained 6 oxen, 20 sheep, and minimal movable property valued at 5 shekels of silver. Wealthy households controlled 50 or more burr of land, owned hundreds of livestock, and possessed movable property valued at multiple mina of silver. These wealth differentials informed progressive tax systems, where burden distribution reflected ability to pay, while ensuring total revenue collections met governmental requirements. Census update procedures maintained population data accuracy between major enumeration cycles. Administrative texts describe annual registration requirements for births, deaths, marriages, property transfers, and occupational changes, recorded by local officials and compiled into central databases at regional administrative centres. These incremental updates enabled administrators to maintain reasonably current population information without conducting complete census operations more frequently than the standard 6-year cycles documented in Year 3 period texts. Tablet CBS 27,893 describes verification procedures where periodic sample audits compared registered information against actual household surveys, identifying registration evasion and ensuring database integrity. Mesopotamian commercial documents reveal centralized trade regulation systems that controlled commerce between different Anunnaki territories and maintained economic integration across the broader administrative network. Tablet CBS 16,042 describes trade protocols including customs procedures, tariff schedules, quality standards, and dispute resolution mechanisms for commercial transactions crossing territorial boundaries. These trade regulations created unified economic zones that facilitated commerce while generating revenue through customs duties and enabling central authorities to monitor and control movement of strategic materials across territorial borders. Customs procedures described in CBS 16,042 required merchants to declare all goods crossing territorial boundaries at designated inspection stations positioned at major trade routes. Officials examined cargo against merchant declarations, assessing quantities, qualities, and values to determine applicable tariff obligations. The text specifies standard inspection procedures including opening sealed containers for random sample verification, weighing bulk goods using calibrated scales maintained by customs officials, and assaying precious metals to verify purity claims. merchants received stamped documentation certifying inspection completion and tariff payment, required for entry into destination territories and preventing multiple taxation of the same goods during transit through sequential jurisdictions. Tariff schedules documented in commercial texts imposed graduated duties based on goods categories and values. Basic agricultural commodities including barley, dates and wool faced minimal duties of 2% of assessed value, encouraging food trade supporting urban populations dependent on agricultural imports. Luxury goods including precious metals, gemstones and fine textiles incurred higher tariff rates of 10%, generating substantial revenues from high-value commerce. Strategic materials including copper, tin, and specialized tools faced variable tariff rates adjusted according to supply conditions, enabling authorities to influence material availability through fiscal policy. Tablet VAT 24,387 contains tariff schedules listing over 150 specific goods categories with corresponding duty rates, demonstrating sophisticated tax systems comparable to modern customs classifications. Quality standard enforcement mechanisms protected consumers while maintaining commercial confidence in interterritorial trade. Administrative texts describe mandatory quality inspections for certain goods categories, including foodstuffs, textiles, and metals, conducted by temple-certified inspectors authorized to verify compliance with established standards. Substandard goods faced rejection, preventing their sale, with merchants bearing losses from failed inspections. The text documents specific quality criteria including minimum grain purity standards of 95% for barley, excluding foreign materials, wool fibre length requirements of minimum 8 cm for premium grades, and bronze alloy composition specifications requiring 12% tin content for tool manufacture. These enforced standards prevented quality degradation in competitive markets, while ensuring consumers received goods meeting legitimate expectations. Dispute resolution mechanisms provided structured procedures for resolving commercial conflicts arising from interterritorial transactions. The text describes specialized commercial courts staffed by experienced merchants, serving as judges who understood trade practices and could evaluate technical disputes involving goods, quality, delivery timing, or payment obligations. Standard procedures required disputing parties to present documentary evidence, including contracts, inspection certificates, and payment records supporting their positions. Witness testimony from unrelated merchants or transport agents provided additional evidence. Courts issued binding decisions enforceable through seizure of goods or property, with appeals possible to territorial administrators if procedural irregularities or clear evidence errors were demonstrated. These systematic dispute resolution procedures created legal certainty supporting long-distance commerce, despite inherent transaction risks. Trade statistics compiled from customs records enabled economic monitoring and policy adjustments. Administrative texts from document monthly trade volumes crossing territorial boundaries, categorized by goods types and merchant origins. Tablet Ashram, 1913. 915 records that during one representative year, 6,400 tons of barley moved from Enlil's agricultural territories into Enki's southern regions supporting urban populations, while 230 tons of copper ore travelled from Anu's northern mining districts to southern metalworking centres. And 8,000 metres of fine linen textile flowed from southern weaving centres to northern markets. These trade flow data enabled administrators to identify supply disruptions, assess economic integration levels, and implement policies encouraging beneficial commerce while restricting potentially harmful trade patterns. The sophisticated irrigation systems that supported Mesopotamian agriculture required centralized coordination that transcended local territorial boundaries, necessitating cooperative administrative arrangements between different Anunnaki jurisdictions. Tablet VAT 13,579 documents water allocation agreements between Enlil's central territories and Enki's southern domains, specifying procedures for managing shared water resources including seasonal flow allocations, maintenance responsibilities, and dispute resolution protocols. The successful operation of these complex hydraulic systems across multiple administrative territories demonstrates sophisticated interjurisdictional cooperation and centralized technical management capabilities. Water allocation agreements documented in VAT 13,579 addressed complex hydrological realities where upstream water usage directly affected downstream availability. The tablet describes negotiations between Enlil's administrators controlling upper Euphrates River territories and Enki's officials governing southern regions dependent on river flow for irrigation. The agreement established seasonal allocation schedules specifying that upstream territories could withdraw maximum 35% of river flow during spring flood periods, when abundant water exceeded downstream requirements, but faced restrictions limiting withdrawals to 15% during summer low-flow periods, when downstream agricultural needs created competing demands. These proportional allocation formulas balanced upstream and downstream interests while adapting to seasonal flow variations. The agreements incorporated measurement systems enabling enforcement of allocation limits. The texts describe permanent flow measurement stations constructed at strategic locations, including the boundary between Enlil and Enki territories near modern Nippur. These stations employed standardized weirs with calibrated markings, enabling visual determination of flow rates based on water depth measurements. Station operators maintained continuous flow records documenting daily measurements, creating databases enabling verification of allocation compliance. Tablet RTC 842 contains monthly flow summaries from a boundary measurement station, recording average daily flows ranging from 1,200 cubic meters per second during spring peaks to 250 cubic meters per second during late summer minimums, demonstrating the sophisticated hydrological monitoring supporting water management agreements. Maintenance responsibility allocation reflected practical considerations about which jurisdiction could most efficiently perform necessary work. The agreement specified that each territory maintained irrigation infrastructure within its own boundaries, but special provisions addressed shared facilities serving multiple territories. Major canal headworks withdrawing water from rivers required joint maintenance with costs shared proportionally based on water usage. The texts document formal inspection procedures where officials from both territories jointly assessed facility conditions, agreed on necessary maintenance work, and coordinated labour mobilisation for repairs. These cooperative maintenance arrangements prevented infrastructure degradation from neglect when no single jurisdiction bore sole responsibility for shared facilities. Dispute resolution protocols provided structured mechanisms for addressing conflicts arising from water management agreements. The texts describe initial resolution attempts through negotiations between territorial representatives meeting at neutral locations, unresolved disputes, escalated to arbitration panels comprising officials from both territories, plus neutral arbitrators appointed by the Central Council at Nippur. Arbitration procedures required presenting hydrological evidence, including flow measurements, historical usage patterns, and agricultural water requirements supporting each position. Arbitration decisions became binding on both territories, enforceable through council authority threatening sanctions against non-compliant administrators. These formal dispute resolution procedures prevented water conflicts from escalating into broader territorial confrontations. The water management agreements enabled agricultural productivity supporting large populations throughout both territories. Statistical compilations from temple archives demonstrate that cooperative irrigation management produced consistently high agricultural yields, averaging 2,400 litres of barley per hectare annually across the combined territories, substantially exceeding the approximately 1,800 litres per hectare typical of rain-fed agriculture. These productivity advantages enabled population densities reaching 60 persons per square kilometre in intensively irrigated regions, supporting urban civilizations that would have been impossible without sophisticated interjurisdictional water management cooperation. The success of these cooperative arrangements demonstrates that Anunnaki territorial administration, despite maintaining distinct jurisdictions and competitive relationships, achieved necessary coordination for managing shared resources through negotiated agreements and institutional frameworks transcending purely local interests. Sumerian military texts describe organized defense systems that protected Anunnaki territories through coordinated military forces operating under unified command structures, despite being drawn from different jurisdictional regions. The stele of the vultures commemorating Enatum's victory over Umi provides evidence of centralized military coordination depicting standardized equipment, uniform tactical formations, and hierarchical command structures that enabled effective military operations. Administrative tablets document military supply systems, troop rotation schedules, and garrison maintenance procedures that supported standing military forces capable of responding to threats across multiple territories. The stele of the vultures discovered at Gersu in 1881 by French archaeologist Ernest de Sarzec depicts military formations organized according to standardized tactical principles employed consistently across different territorial forces. The monument's relief carvings show infantry units arranged in phalanx formations with soldiers positioned shoulder to shoulder in ranks 6 men deep, creating unified fighting blocks that could maneuver as coordinated units rather than masses of individual warriors. Each soldier carries identical equipment, including rectangular shields, measuring approximately 90 centimeters in height, bronze-tipped spears of standardized length, and copper helmets of uniform design. This equipment standardization enabled tactical coordination, where soldiers understood their weapons' capabilities matched their comrades', allowing confident execution of coordinated maneuvers requiring mutual support and consistent performance across entire formations. The command hierarchy depicted on the stele demonstrates sophisticated military organization extending beyond simple tribal leadership structures. The uppermost register shows the Anatum as supreme commander, receiving divine authorization for military operations from the territorial deity, establishing clear command authority derived from administrative legitimacy rather than personal charisma. Subordinate officers appear in middle registers, distinguished by distinctive insignia including ceremonial maces and elaborate headdresses marking their command positions. These officers controlled tactical subunits of approximately 50 soldiers, creating manageable command spans enabling effective battlefield control. The hierarchical structure enabled delegation of tactical execution to subordinate commanders while maintaining strategic coordination through the unified command authority. Military supply systems documented in administrative tablets from demonstrate logistical capabilities supporting sustained military operations across extended campaigns. Tablet UET 3947 record supply allocations for a military expedition comprising 2,000 soldiers deployed for a 45-day campaign. The text details daily ration requirements totaling 4,000 litres of barley, 800 litres of vegetable oil, and 200 kilograms of dried fish, necessitating transport of 180,000 litres of barley and 36,000 litres of oil for the complete campaign duration. Supply trains required 240 donkeys carrying 75 kilogram loads each. Supported by 120 handlers and security personnel protecting valuable provisions, the administrative precision required to calculate requirements, assemble supplies, and coordinate transport demonstrates sophisticated logistical planning capabilities essential for projecting military power beyond immediate territorial borders. Garrison maintenance systems described in military administrative texts established permanent military installations providing rapid response capabilities throughout territorial boundaries. Tablet CBS 28,563 documents garrison operations at a frontier post maintaining a standing force of 120 soldiers organized into 3 rotating companies. Each company served 30-day active duty periods, followed by 60-day stand-down intervals, creating continuous garrison presence, while enabling soldiers to maintain agricultural activities, supporting their families during off-duty periods. The garrison included permanent facilities with barracks housing on-duty personnel, weapons storage arsenals maintaining standardized equipment inventories, and grain storage providing 6-month emergency rations enabling sustained operations during supply disruptions. These permanent installations enabled rapid mobilization during emergencies, while distributing military capabilities throughout territories rather than concentrating forces at distant central locations. Troop rotation schedules coordinated military manpower requirements with agricultural labor demands, recognizing that most soldiers derived from farming populations whose absence affected food production. The texts describe rotation systems scheduling military service during agricultural slack periods following harvest completion and preceding planting seasons when labor requirements decreased. Winter months saw increased garrison strengths providing security during periods when reduced agricultural activity enabled higher military participation. Summer campaigns coordinated with planting. Completion but preceded harvest seasons when soldiers' absence would create critical labor shortages. These carefully timed rotation schedules balanced military security requirements against economic necessities, demonstrating administrative sophistication that recognized interconnections between military capabilities and agricultural productivity. Training systems described in military texts established standardized combat proficiency across territorial forces despite soldiers' diverse origins. The documents specify mandatory training programs conducted during initial military service, teaching formation movements, weapon techniques, and tactical procedures enabling cohesive unit operations. Training emphasized collective discipline over individual combat prowess. Developing soldiers' abilities to maintain formation integrity during combat stress and execute coordinated maneuvers requiring mutual trust and consistent performance. Annual refresher training for garrison forces maintained proficiency during extended peace periods, preventing skill degradation that would compromise military effectiveness. These systematic training programs created professional military capabilities exceeding those of untrained militias or tribal war bands, providing territorial defense forces with decisive advantages over less organized opponents. Mesopotamian legal texts reveal sophisticated judicial systems that operated within each Anunnaki territory while maintaining coordination through appellate procedures and standardized legal principles. The laws of Eshnunna and similar legal collections demonstrate consistent judicial frameworks across different territorial jurisdictions, suggesting centralized legal standard setting that ensured uniform justice administration throughout the Anunnaki governance network. Administrative tablets document court procedures, evidence requirements, witness protocols, and enforcement mechanisms that enable systematic justice administration according to established legal principles rather than arbitrary local customs. The laws of Eshnunna, dating to approximately 1930 BC, establish comprehensive legal frameworks covering commercial transactions, property rights, family law, and criminal offences with sufficient detail to guide judicial decision-making across diverse case circumstances. The legal code specifies 60 distinct provisions addressing common legal disputes including debt obligations, contract breaches, property damages, personal injuries, and various criminal acts. Each provision establishes clear standards defining prohibited conduct, specifying remedies or punishments, and allocating burdens of proof between parties. Law 36 addresses property damage caused by wandering livestock, specifying that owners bear strict liability for damages their animals cause to cultivated fields, requiring compensation of 1.3 times the damaged crop's value. The precision of these legal standards enabled consistent judicial outcomes across different courts, applying identical legal principles to similar factual situations. Court procedures documented in administrative tablets demonstrate systematic approaches ensuring fair hearings and reliable fact-finding. Tablet CBS 31247 describes standard trial procedures beginning with plaintiffs. Presentation of claims supported by documentary evidence including contracts, property records, or witness statements. Defendants responded with their own evidence and arguments, creating adversarial proceedings where courts heard competing positions before rendering judgments. Judges could question parties directly, request additional evidence, or summon witnesses possessing relevant knowledge. These active judicial roles enabled courts to develop complete factual records supporting well-reasoned decisions, rather than passively accepting whatever evidence parties chose to present. Evidence requirements established standards ensuring judicial decisions rested on reliable factual foundations. The texts distinguish between direct evidence from eyewitnesses with personal knowledge of disputed events and circumstantial evidence requiring inferential reasoning to establish relevant facts. Written documents bearing official seals received presumptive reliability, with challenging parties bearing burdens to prove fraud or error. Witness testimony required corroboration from multiple independent sources before establishing disputed facts, preventing convictions based solely on single accusers whose motivations might compromise testimony reliability. These evidentiary standards created systematic procedures protecting against wrongful convictions while enabling justified punishments for proven offences. Witness protocols regulated testimonial evidence to ensure reliability and prevent perjury. The texts require witnesses to swear oaths invoking divine punishment for false testimony, creating religious deterrents against perjury. Witnesses providing false testimony face severe penalties, including fines and corporal punishment proportional to harms their perjury caused. Tablet VAT 26,891 documents a case where a witness who provided false testimony leading to wrongful property seizure faced penalties including return of seized property, compensation payment of twice the property's value, and public flogging of 40 lashes. These harsh penalties for perjury demonstrated judicial commitment to testimonial reliability and deterred witnesses from providing false evidence supporting friends or harming enemies. Enforcement mechanisms enabled courts to implement their judgments despite resistance from losing parties. The texts describe enforcement officials empowered to seize property, attach wages, or arrest judgment debtors refusing voluntary compliance. Property seizures followed systematic procedures requiring official inventories, documenting seized items and their estimated values, public auctions conducted under judicial supervision, and distribution of sale proceeds first to satisfy judgment amounts, with any surplus returned to judgment debtors. These regulated enforcement procedures prevented arbitrary seizures or corrupt officials enriching themselves through enforcement activities, maintaining public confidence in judicial processes. Appellate procedures enabled review of lower court decisions, providing error correction mechanisms and ensuring legal consistency across the judicial system. Administrative tablets document appellate courts, staffed by senior judges with extensive experience who reviewed lower court records and heard arguments from appealing parties. Appellate review focused on legal errors in applying substantive law or procedural violations affecting trial fairness, rather than simple disagreements with factual findings, where trial courts possessed advantages observing witness demeanour and assessing credibility. Successful appeals resulted in reversed judgments or case remands for new trials correcting identified errors. These appellate mechanisms created hierarchical judicial systems, enabling legal evolution through precedential decisions while maintaining consistency in legal interpretation across territorial boundaries. The dual function of Mesopotamian temples as both religious centers and administrative headquarters created integrated governance systems, where spiritual authority reinforced bureaucratic control. Temple administrative archives from Lagash contain economic documents demonstrating that religious institutions managed vast agricultural estates, industrial workshops, and commercial enterprises that generated revenue supporting both religious activities and governmental administration. This religious administrative integration enabled effective governance by combining spiritual legitimacy with practical administrative capabilities, creating unified authority structures that commanded both religious devotion and bureaucratic compliance. Temple economic activities extended far beyond receiving offerings and conducting religious ceremonies to encompass comprehensive business operations rivaling modern corporate enterprises. Administrative archives from the Bu Temple at Lagash, excavated by French archaeologists between 1931 and 1933, contain over 3,000 economic tablets documenting temple business operations during a 15-year period under the administration of Enlil and Lugalanda. These tablets reveal the temple controlled approximately 14,000 hectares of agricultural land cultivated by dependent labourers producing barley, dates, vegetables, and animal products. Annual agricultural production averaged 33 million litres of barley valued at approximately 11,000 kilograms of silver, providing enormous revenue supporting temple operations and contributing substantially to regional economic activity. Temple industrial operations encompass diverse manufacturing activities, producing textiles, leather goods, metal implements, pottery, and construction materials. The Lagash Temple archives document textile workshops employing over 6,000 workers, predominantly women, producing annually approximately 300,000 garments from wool and flax fibres. These textiles served multiple purposes, including clothing for temple personnel, offerings for religious ceremonies, trade goods exchange for imported materials, and payment for labour services supporting temple operations. The industrial scale of these operations required sophisticated management systems, coordinating raw material procurement, production scheduling, quality control, and product distribution across complex supply chains. Temple commercial enterprises engaged in long-distance trade obtaining materials unavailable locally while marketing surplus production in foreign markets. Administrative texts document trade expeditions to Dilmun in the Persian Gulf, Magan on the Arabian Peninsula, and Meluha in the Indus Valley, exchanging Mesopotamian agricultural and manufactured products for copper, timber, precious stones, and exotic luxury goods. Tablet CBS 33,492 records a trading expedition investing 12 mina of silver, approximately 6 kilograms, in trade goods shipped to Dilmun, with expected returns of 18 mina, representing 50% profit margins typical of risky long-distance commerce. These commercial profits supplemented agricultural and industrial revenues, diversifying temple economic activities and reducing dependence on single revenue sources. The economic power concentrated in temple institutions enabled them to function as central banks, providing credit to farmers, merchants, and craftsmen requiring capital for business operations. Temple archives document thousands of loan transactions advancing silver or barley to borrowers with repayment obligations, including standard interest rates of 20% annually for commodity loans and 33.3% for silver loans. Loan contracts specify detailed terms including repayment schedules, collateral requirements, and default penalties, enabling temple officials to manage credit portfolios, minimizing losses, while supporting economic activity throughout their territories. The availability of temple credit enabled economic expansion that would have been impossible without institutional lenders possessing capital reserves sufficient to finance numerous simultaneous loans. Religious authority and economic power reinforced each other, creating unified control systems. Temple administrators derived legitimacy from religious roles as servants of territorial deities, enabling them to command popular obedience based on spiritual devotion rather than purely coercive force. The economic resources controlled by temples enabled them to employ large staffs, maintain impressive facilities, conduct elaborate ceremonies, and support dependent populations. Demonstrating divine favour and reinforcing religious authority. This mutually reinforcing relationship between spiritual and material power created stable governance systems resistant to challenges from purely secular authorities, lacking comparable legitimacy sources. The integration of religious and administrative functions appears architecturally in temple complex layouts, combining sacred spaces with practical facilities. The Eninu temple complex at Lagash described in detailed building. Inscriptions included central sanctuaries housing divine images and conducting religious ceremonies, surrounded by administrative offices managing temple business operations, storage facilities holding agricultural produce and manufactured goods, workshops producing offerings and trade items, and residential quarters housing temple personnel. This physical integration demonstrated the inseparability of religious and administrative functions, creating unified institutions serving both spiritual and practical governmental purposes. Cuneiform texts contain evidence of systematic knowledge transfer programs that disseminated advanced technologies and administrative techniques throughout the Anunnaki governance network. Tablet CBS 15623 describes training programs where selected humans received instruction in specialized skills including metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, and architectural engineering under direct Anunnaki supervision. These knowledge transfer programs created technically skilled human administrators who could implement sophisticated systems while maintaining dependence on Anunnaki expertise for the most advanced capabilities, ensuring continued divine administrative oversight. The training program described in CBS 15623 employed selective recruitment, identifying promising candidates through examinations testing mathematical aptitude, memorization capacity, and logical reasoning abilities. Candidates demonstrating superior capabilities received invitations to attend specialized schools located within major temple complexes, where Anunnaki administrators or their designated human masters provided advanced instruction. The text indicates that approximately one candidate per 1,000 population achieved selection, creating small elite classes possessing knowledge far exceeding that available to general populations. This selective knowledge distribution maintained clear hierarchical distinctions between technically educated administrators and ordinary populations lacking access to advanced training. Metallurgical instruction documented in the training texts covered theoretical principles and practical techniques, enabling production of bronze implements with optimal performance characteristics. Students learned identification methods recognizing copper and tin minerals, smelting procedures achieving temperatures necessary for metal extraction, and alloying techniques producing bronze with precise compositional ratios. The texts specify that optimal bronze for tool manufacture contains 12% tin with 88% copper, producing alloys with ideal hardness and durability characteristics. Advanced instruction covered specialized techniques including lost wax casting for complex shapes, cold working for improving metal properties, and surface treatments creating protective oxide layers preventing corrosion. Graduates of these programs could establish and operate sophisticated metallurgical workshops, producing implements matching quality standards established by Anunnaki administrators. Astronomical training programs prepared students for roles as temple astronomers, maintaining observational records and calculating calendrical relationships. Instruction covered constellation identification, enabling recognition of stellar positions throughout the annual cycle, planetary motion observation documenting the complex apparent movements of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and mathematical techniques calculating lunar phases and eclipse predictions. Students learn to operate observational instruments including sighting tubes for precise position measurements, water clocks for timing observations, and angle measuring devices quantifying celestial positions. The training produced astronomers capable of maintaining the sophisticated observational programs supporting administrative timing coordination, described in earlier astronomical texts. Mathematical instruction provided computational skills enabling students to perform complex calculations required for administrative operations. The curriculum covered base 60 numerical notation, enabling efficient calculation of large numbers. Fractional arithmetic for precise quantity measurements, area and volume calculations for land surveying and storage capacity determination, and mathematical tables providing reference data for common calculations. Advanced students learned algebraic techniques, solving equations with unknown quantities, geometric principles for architectural design, and statistical methods analyzing administrative data. These mathematical capabilities enabled trained administrators to implement sophisticated accounting systems, conduct resource planning, and design complex infrastructure projects. Architectural engineering instruction combined theoretical principles with practical construction techniques. Students learned structural mechanics principles determining load distributions and strength requirements, surveying methods establishing precise site layouts and vertical alignments, and construction management procedures coordinating labour forces and material supplies. The training covered specialised building techniques including foundation designs for different soil conditions, arch construction methods spanning openings without internal supports, and vault designs creating enclosed spaces with minimal material usage. Graduates could design and supervise construction of temples, palaces, fortifications, and infrastructure projects matching architectural standards established by Anunnaki administrators. Knowledge transfer programs maintain deliberate limitations preventing humans from achieving complete technical independence. The most advanced capabilities, including certain metallurgical techniques, astronomical calculation methods, and architectural designs, remained restricted to direct Anunnaki supervision or specially selected human masters who received additional secret instruction unavailable to standard program graduates. These knowledge restrictions ensured that human administrators required ongoing Anunnaki guidance for the most sophisticated technical challenges, maintaining divine oversight and preventing complete human autonomy that might threaten established governance structures. The Sumerian king list and related dynastic documents reveal sophisticated succession planning systems that managed leadership transitions within human kingdoms under Anunnaki oversight. These succession protocols included bloodline verification procedures, competency testing, ritual legitimization ceremonies, and formal investiture processes that ensured smooth leadership transitions while maintaining Anunnaki administrative control. The precision of these succession systems and their successful implementation across multiple dynasties demonstrate long-term governance planning and institutional continuity that transcended individual rulers' lifespans. The Sumerian king list, compiled during the Earthly period, but incorporating earlier source materials, documents royal successions, spanning multiple dynasties with remarkable genealogical precision. The text traces bloodlines through multiple generations, identifying each ruler's parentage and relationship to predecessors, creating documented legitimacy chains connecting contemporary rulers to ancient dynastic founders. Bloodline verification procedures described in administrative texts required prospective rulers to present genealogical evidence, including temple records documenting births, marriages, and family relationships. Officials examined these records verifying claimed ancestries, consulting with elder family members confirming genealogical assertions, and comparing physical characteristics against known family traits. Only candidates demonstrating legitimate bloodline connections qualified for succession consideration, preventing usurpation by individuals lacking proper hereditary claims. Competency testing evaluated candidates' abilities to perform royal duties effectively, ensuring selections based on merit in addition to bloodline legitimacy. Administrative tablets document examination procedures, testing candidates' literacy through reading and writing exercises, mathematical abilities through calculation problems simulating administrative challenges, legal knowledge through case analysis requiring application of legal principles to hypothetical disputes, and diplomatic skills through simulated negotiations requiring persuasion and compromise. Military competency evaluations required candidates to demonstrate weapon proficiency, tactical knowledge, and leadership capabilities commanding military units during training exercises. These comprehensive examinations ensured that selected rulers possessed practical capabilities necessary for effective governance rather than relying solely on hereditary claims. Ritual legitimization ceremonies conducted under Anunnaki supervision transformed successful candidates into legitimate rulers recognized by both divine and human populations. The texts describe elaborate multi-day ceremonies beginning with purification rituals cleansing candidates of common human status, progressing through symbolic death and rebirth, representing transformation into royal persons, and culminating in divine investiture, where Anunnaki representatives formally transferred authority to new rulers. The ceremonies involved sacred objects including royal regalia, divine emblems, and legitimacy symbols whose presentation signified official recognition and authorization to exercise governmental authority. Formal investiture processes transferred specific governing powers and responsibilities through documented procedures creating clear authority boundaries. Investiture documents similar to the tablets of destinies described earlier enumerated granted powers including military command, judicial authority, taxation rights, and treaty-making capabilities, while specifying limitations including prohibitions against particular actions requiring higher authority approval. New rulers swore formal oaths pledging faithful execution of their duties, obedience to divine authority, and protection of their subjects' welfare, creating contractual obligations enforceable through divine sanctions if violated. These formalized authority transfers created predictable succession procedures, reducing uncertainty and potential conflicts during vulnerable transition periods. The succession systems incorporated regency provisions, managing situations where legitimate heirs were too young to rule effectively. Administrative texts describe regency councils comprising senior advisors, temple officials, and military commanders who exercised governmental authority until young rulers reached maturity. Regency protocols established clear authority structures, specified educational programs preparing young rulers for their future responsibilities, and defined procedures for power transfers when rulers achieved maturity. These regency arrangements ensured governmental continuity even when biological succession produced child rulers unable to exercise authority personally. Dynastic management extended beyond individual successions to encompass long-term planning, ensuring stable governance across multiple generations. The texts document marriage alliances between royal families, creating kinship networks providing succession alternatives if primary lineages failed, treaty arrangements establishing mutual defense obligations, protecting allied dynasties against overthrow attempts, and institutional frameworks maintaining governmental continuity despite dynastic changes. These comprehensive dynastic management systems created stable political orders enduring across centuries, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of long-term governance requirements exceeding individual rulers' lifespans or immediate political circumstances. Egyptian administrative texts demonstrate governance systems remarkably similar to Mesopotamian patterns, suggesting coordinated administrative frameworks or knowledge transfer between civilizations under related divine oversight. The Palermo stone preserves Egyptian royal annals documenting administrative activities, resource management, and territorial governance that parallel Sumerian administrative records in organizational structure, accounting methods, and bureaucratic procedures. These administrative parallels extend beyond superficial similarities to include identical technical terminologies, synchronized calendar systems, and coordinated astronomical observations that suggest institutional connections between Mesopotamian and Egyptian governance systems. The Palermo stone discovered in 1877 and named after its current location in the Palermo Archaeological Museum, contains royal annals from the first 5 Egyptian dynasties spanning approximately 3100 to 2600 BC. The inscribed basalt fragments preserve year-by-year records of administrative activities, including tax assessments, military expeditions, construction projects, and religious ceremonies documented using accounting methods virtually identical to those found in contemporary Sumerian administrative texts. Each annual entry records the height of the Nile flood measured in cubits and palms, exactly paralleling Mesopotamian practices of recording Tigris and Euphrates flood levels as fundamental data points for economic planning. The systematic recording of these hydrological measurements demonstrates both civilizations recognized flood levels as critical variables affecting agricultural productivity and requiring precise documentation for administrative forecasting. Administrative terminology preserved on the Palermo stone reveals linguistic connections suggesting direct knowledge transfer between Egyptian and Mesopotamian bureaucratic systems. The Egyptian term Shemsu, meaning followers or administrators, corresponds precisely to the Sumerian word maskim, indicating appointed officials exercising delegated authority. Egyptian imira, designating overseer positions, matches functionally and etymologically with Sumerian ugula used for supervisory roles throughout administrative hierarchies. These terminological correspondences extend beyond simple functional equivalence to demonstrate probable linguistic borrowing, suggesting Egyptian administrative vocabulary derived partially from Mesopotamian sources, or both systems drew from common earlier traditions. The consistency of these administrative terms across thousands of documents from both civilizations indicates standardized bureaucratic language facilitating coordination between different governmental systems. Calendar synchronization between Egyptian and Mesopotamian systems enabled coordinated administrative activities despite the civilizations. Geographical separation. Both systems employed 365-day civil calendars supplemented by intercalation procedures, maintaining alignment with solar years and agricultural seasons. The Egyptian civil calendar, beginning with the heliacal rising of Sirius in mid-July, corresponds closely with Mesopotamian calendar systems that similarly employed stellar observations for calendar anchoring. Administrative texts from both civilizations document identical practices of adding intercalary months, maintaining calendar synchronization with astronomical phenomena, enabling simultaneous implementation of policies requiring precise seasonal timing across both regions. The mathematical sophistication required for these calendar calculations and the remarkable consistency between systems separated by over 1,500 kilometers strongly suggests coordinated development or systematic knowledge transfer. Astronomical observations recorded in Egyptian texts match Mesopotamian observational records with precision, indicating either shared data sources or coordinated observation programs. The Cairo calendar, preserved on papyrus fragments dating to approximately 1200 BC, contains astronomical data, including lunar phase predictions and planetary position calculations, employing mathematical techniques identical to those documented in Mesopotamian astronomical texts. Specific observations, including recorded eclipse dates and planetary conjunction timings, appear in both Egyptian and Mesopotamian sources with matching accuracy, suggesting either direct communication of observational data or standardized observation protocols producing consistent results. The administrative implications of this astronomical coordination enabled synchronized timing of governmental activities across both civilizations, facilitating coordinated policy implementations and enabling long-distance administrative cooperation. Architectural evidence supports institutional connections between Egyptian and Mesopotamian administrative systems through remarkably similar temple complex layouts serving dual religious and governmental functions. The Karnak temple complex at Thebes demonstrates organizational principles matching Mesopotamian ziggurat complexes, including central religious sanctuaries surrounded by administrative offices, economic processing facilities, storage magazines, and communication centres arranged according to standardised functional layouts. Archaeological surveys conducted by the French Egyptian Antiquities Service documented that Karnak's administrative wing contained archive rooms with tablet storage systems, scribal offices with standardised dimensions, and accounting facilities organised identically to comparable spaces in Mesopotamian temples. This architectural standardisation enabled Egyptian and Mesopotamian administrative personnel to function effectively in either civilization's facilities, suggesting deliberate coordination, creating interoperable governmental infrastructure. Economic integration between Egypt and Mesopotamia facilitated knowledge transfer supporting administrative coordination. Trade records from both civilizations document extensive commercial exchanges including Egyptian gold and papyrus traded for Mesopotamian grain and manufactured goods, creating economic relationships requiring compatible accounting systems and coordinated commercial regulations. Administrative texts describe Egyptian merchants operating in Mesopotamian cities, using standard commercial protocols, while Mesopotamian traders established permanent facilities in Egyptian urban centres. These sustained commercial interactions necessitated compatible administrative frameworks, enabling contract enforcement, dispute resolution, and taxation across civilizational boundaries, driving convergence towards standardized governmental procedures. Archaeological discoveries from Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reveal standardized administrative systems including uniform weights and measures, consistent urban planning, and centralized economic coordination that parallel Mesopotamian administrative patterns. The widespread distribution of identical administrative seals across the Indus Valley civilization suggests centralized authority coordinating activities across vast territories, similar to Anunnaki territorial governance models documented in Mesopotamian texts. Trade connections between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia facilitated not only commercial exchange but also administrative knowledge transfer that disseminated governance techniques and organizational principles across ancient civilizations. The standardized weights and measures documented throughout Indus Valley archaeological sites demonstrate centralized administrative control comparable to Mesopotamian systems. Excavations at Harappa, conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India between 1920 and 1921, uncovered standardized weight sets comprising cubical stones precisely graduated in binary and decimal sequences. The base weight unit measured approximately 27.5 grams, with larger weights following exact multiples of 8.6, 13.7, 27.5, 55, 110, 220, and 440 grams. This binary progression enabling precise measurement of diverse quantities parallels the sexagesimal weight systems used in Mesopotamia, suggesting either independent development of similar mathematical principles or direct knowledge transfer between civilizations. The remarkable consistency of these weights across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers indicates centralized manufacturing and distribution systems maintaining uniform standards throughout the Indus Valley civilization. Urban planning at major Indus Valley sites reveals standardization exceeding that found in contemporary Mesopotamian cities, suggesting even more centralized administrative control. Mohenjo-Daro, excavated by R.D. Banerjee in 1922, demonstrates grid planning with streets oriented precisely along cardinal directions, creating rectangular city blocks of standardized dimensions. Main avenues measured 9.1 meters wide maintained throughout the city, while secondary streets followed consistent 7-meter widths, demonstrating implementation of unified planning standards. Buildings within each block adhered to standardized construction techniques using fired bricks of identical dimensions, measuring 7 centimeters by 14 centimeters by 28 centimeters, a precise ratio of 1 to 2 to 4 enabling efficient construction and material calculations. This extraordinary standardization across a city housing an estimated 40,000 inhabitants indicates powerful central authority capable of implementing and enforcing comprehensive planning regulations. Administrative seals discovered throughout Indus Valley sites provide direct evidence of bureaucratic systems coordinating economic activities across the civilization. Over 3,500 distinct seals have been recovered from various sites, typically measuring 2 centimeters square and carved from steatite with designs including script, animal motifs, and geometric patterns. The widespread distribution of identical seal designs across multiple sites separated by vast distances suggests these seals authenticated documents or goods originating from specific administrative centres, enabling recipients to verify origins and authority. The seal designs follow standardized formats with script appearing in consistent positions and animal motifs drawn according to conventional artistic rules, indicating centralized training of seal carvers or distribution of master seals from which copies were produced. These administrative seals function similarly to Mesopotamian cylinder seals used for authenticating official documents and commercial transactions, demonstrating parallel development of bureaucratic authentication systems. Trade connections between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia are documented through archaeological discoveries at both ends of the commercial network. Mesopotamian sites including Ur and Lagash have yielded Indus Valley seals, carnelian beads manufactured using techniques specific to Indian craftsmen, and etched carnelian beads displaying designs characteristic of Indus Valley artistic traditions. Conversely, Indus Valley sites contain Mesopotamian cylinder seals, lapis lazuli sourced from Afghan deposits typically traded through Mesopotamian commercial networks, and pottery vessels of distinctly Mesopotamian design. These reciprocal discoveries demonstrate sustained commercial relationships requiring compatible administrative systems for conducting long-distance trade, negotiating contracts, and resolving disputes across civilizational boundaries. Administrative knowledge transfer facilitated by these trade connections appears in the adoption of specific bureaucratic techniques. The emergence of standardized weights in the Indus Valley civilization coincides chronologically with the period of most intensive trade contact with Mesopotamia around 2300 BC, suggesting Mesopotamian metrological systems influenced Indus Valley administrative development. Similarly, the sophisticated urban planning evident at Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa demonstrates implementation of organizational principles paralleling those documented in Mesopotamian administrative texts, including functional zoning separating residential, commercial and industrial districts and centralized infrastructure systems providing water supply and waste removal services. These parallels suggest that trade relationships facilitated not merely commercial exchanges, but also transfer of governmental innovations and administrative technologies. The Indus script preserved on thousands of seals and pottery fragments remains undeciphered, but demonstrates characteristics suggesting it recorded administrative information similar to cuneiform's documentary functions. Statistical analysis of script usage shows high repetition of specific sign combinations appearing on seals from different sites, suggesting standardized administrative formulas or titles comparable to those found in Mesopotamian administrative texts. The brevity of most inscriptions, averaging 5 signs, suggests they recorded names, titles, or transaction identifiers rather than extended narratives, exactly matching the documentary functions of Mesopotamian seal inscriptions. The systematic nature of the script and its consistent association with administrative contexts strongly indicates it served bureaucratic record-keeping functions within centralized governmental systems. Late Sumerian texts describe the systematic withdrawal of direct Anunnaki administration and the transition of governmental functions to human intermediaries trained in divine administrative techniques. Tablet CBS 19,847 documents transition procedures including knowledge transfer protocols, authority delegation ceremonies, and ongoing oversight arrangements that maintained administrative continuity despite reduced direct divine involvement. These transition records describe establishment of hereditary priesthoods who preserved administrative knowledge, mystery schools that maintained technical capabilities, and institutional structures that enabled human civilizations to continue functioning according to the governance frameworks established during the period of direct Anunnaki administration. The transition procedures documented in CBS 19847 describe a phased withdrawal process extending across multiple generations, rather than abrupt abandonment of administrative oversight. The text specifies that initial transition phases involved Anunnaki administrators gradually reducing direct involvement in routine decisions while maintaining oversight of strategic planning and crisis management. Human administrators trained through the knowledge transfer programs described earlier assumed progressively greater responsibilities, initially implementing policies established by Anunnaki superiors, but eventually developing independent policy-making capabilities under continued divine guidance. This gradual delegation enabled human administrators to develop necessary competencies without catastrophic failures that might result from precipitous authority transfers exceeding human organizational capacities. Knowledge transfer protocols established during the transition focused on preserving the most critical administrative capabilities enabling continued civilizational functioning. The texts prioritized transfer of agricultural management techniques, ensuring food security, hydraulic engineering knowledge maintaining irrigation systems, legal frameworks providing social order, and economic administration supporting complex urban societies. Specialized training programs concentrated advanced knowledge within hereditary priesthoods, selected for demonstrated competencies, and verified loyalty to established governance frameworks. These priestly families received comprehensive instruction in astronomical observation, mathematical calculation, architectural design, and other technical specializations requiring extended training periods exceeding individual lifetimes for complete knowledge transmission. Authority delegation ceremonies formalized the transfer of governmental responsibilities from Anunnaki administrators to human successors through elaborate rituals demonstrating legitimacy and creating public acceptance of new authority structures. The text describes ceremonies conducted at Nippur's Ekur complex, where Anunnaki officials formally transferred specific administrative powers to designated human priests, witnessed by assembled representatives from throughout Mesopotamian territories. The ceremonies included presentation of administrative symbols, including seals, staffs, and written documents enumerating delegated authorities, public recitations of transferred responsibilities, and divine blessings authorizing human exercise of powers previously reserved for Anunnaki officials. These public ceremonies created shared understanding of administrative transitions and discouraged challenges to newly established human authorities. Ongoing oversight arrangements maintained Anunnaki influence over critical decisions despite reduced direct administrative involvement. The texts describe consultation protocols requiring human administrators to seek divine guidance before implementing major policy changes, conducting military campaigns, or modifying established legal frameworks. Consultation occurred through specified mechanisms including dream incubation, where administrators sleeping in temple sanctuaries received divine communications, omen interpretation where priests analyze celestial phenomena or animal behaviors indicating divine preferences, and direct prophetic communications where specially trained priests served as channels for divine messages. These ongoing consultation requirements maintained ultimate Anunnaki authority while enabling human administrators to manage routine governmental operations independently. Mystery schools established during the transition preserved advanced technical knowledge within restricted groups maintaining capabilities essential for civilizational functioning. These schools operated within major temple complexes under direct priestly control, admitting only carefully selected students who underwent years of instruction in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, engineering, and other specialized disciplines. The curriculum combined theoretical instruction with practical training, producing graduates capable of maintaining irrigation systems, conducting astronomical observations, administering justice according to established legal principles, and managing complex economic operations. The schools maintained knowledge continuity across generations through systematic instruction of new students by aging masters, ensuring critical capabilities survived even as individual practitioners died. Institutional structures established during the transition enabled continued governmental functioning through bureaucratic organizations operating according to standardized procedures rather than depending on individual administrators' personal capabilities. The texts describe creation of permanent administrative offices with defined responsibilities, documented procedures, and archival systems preserving institutional memory. These bureaucratic structures enabled smooth personnel transitions as individual officials retired or died, with successors assuming existing roles and continuing established practices documented in procedural manuals and precedent records. The institutional frameworks created resilient governmental systems surviving political upheavals, foreign conquests, and dynastic changes that might otherwise have caused administrative collapse. The remarkable persistence of Mesopotamian administrative techniques throughout subsequent civilizations demonstrates the effectiveness of knowledge preservation systems established during the transition from direct Anunnaki governance. Persian administrative texts from the Achaemenid period employ accounting methods, organizational structures, and bureaucratic procedures identical to Sumerian systems developed 2,000 years earlier, suggesting continuous institutional transmission of administrative knowledge. Greek and Roman governmental systems similarly incorporated Mesopotamian administrative principles, including territorial organization, census methods, and tax collection systems, indicating that governance frameworks established under Anunnaki oversight provided the institutional foundation for subsequent empires. Achaemenid Persian administrative documents from the 5th and 4th centuries BC demonstrate accounting techniques virtually unchanged from Sumerian practices documented a millennium and a half earlier. The Persepolis fortification archive excavated between 1933 and 1934 contains over 30,000 tablets recording administrative transactions using cuneiform script and Elamite language, but employing accounting methods identical to those found in Year 3 period documents. The tablets document grain distributions, livestock allocations, and labor assignments calculated using the same mathematical techniques, recorded in identical formats, and organized according to matching bureaucratic procedures. Wine rations issued to workers at Persepolis followed allocation schedules precisely matching barley ration systems documented in Sumerian texts, suggesting Persian administrators consciously adopted proven Mesopotamian administrative practices rather than developing independent systems. Organizational structures governing Persian provincial administration replicated Mesopotamian territorial models, establishing standardized governmental frameworks across vast geographical areas. The Persian satrapy system dividing the empire into 20 provinces governed by appointed officials parallels the Anunnaki Territorial Divisions of Mesopotamia, with remarkably similar administrative hierarchies, reporting relationships, and functional responsibilities. Each satrap exercised authority comparable to Mesopotamian territorial administrators, including taxation powers, judicial oversight, and military command, while remaining subordinate to central imperial authority. The standardization of administrative procedures across satrapies enabled efficient imperial governance through familiar bureaucratic mechanisms, suggesting Persian administrators studied and adopted Mesopotamian governmental models preserved in cuneiform archives accessible throughout their empire. Greek administrative systems incorporated Mesopotamian bureaucratic innovations through contacts facilitated by Persian imperial structures and direct Greek colonial settlements in Mesopotamian regions. the Seleucid kingdom established by Alexander the Great's successors adopted wholesale the administrative infrastructure of their Persian predecessors, including record-keeping systems, taxation methods, and territorial organization principles ultimately derived from Mesopotamian sources. Seleucid administrative texts from Uruk dating to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC demonstrate Greek rulers employing native Mesopotamian scribes, maintaining administrative records using traditional cuneiform techniques and Babylonian mathematical calculations. This administrative continuity enabled efficient governance by leveraging established bureaucratic systems rather than imposing unfamiliar Greek practices on populations accustomed to traditional procedures. Roman governmental systems reveal Mesopotamian influences transmitted through Hellenistic intermediaries and direct Roman contacts with Eastern territories. Roman census practices including household enumeration, property assessment, and occupational classification closely parallel procedures documented in Mesopotamian administrative texts. The Roman taxation system, collecting revenues based on assessed property values and agricultural productivity, employs calculation methods matching Sumerian precedents preserved through continuous institutional transmission. Provincial administration under Roman governors exercising comprehensive civil and military authority within defined territorial boundaries replicates organizational patterns established under Anunnaki territorial governance and perpetuated through successive imperial systems. The preservation of Mesopotamian administrative knowledge occurred through multiple transmission mechanisms, ensuring survival despite political disruptions and cultural changes. Scribal schools maintained continuous operation across dynastic transitions and foreign conquests, training new generations of administrators in traditional techniques documented in cuneiform archives. Temple institutions preserving economic and administrative texts provided reference materials enabling administrators to consult precedents and maintain procedural consistency across time periods. The practical effectiveness of Mesopotamian administrative techniques created strong incentives for continued use, as subsequent rulers recognized that proven systems enabled efficient governance more reliably than experimental innovations. Legal systems preserving Mesopotamian jurisprudence demonstrate particularly strong continuity across multiple civilizations. The Code of Hammurabi influenced subsequent legal collections including the Hittite laws, the Middle Assyrian laws, and eventually Mosaic law preserved in biblical texts. Roman legal principles including written codes, systematic jurisprudence, and procedural safeguards reflect Mesopotamian precedents, transmitted through Hellenistic legal systems. The fundamental concepts of rule of law, judicial independence, and legal equality that characterize modern justice systems trace intellectual lineage to Mesopotamian innovations developed under Anunnaki, administrative oversight, and preserved through institutional transmission spanning 4 millennia. Modern discoveries continue to validate the interpretation of ancient texts as documenting practical administrative systems rather than purely mythological abstractions. Recent excavations at Tel Beidar in Syria uncovered administrative archives containing organizational documents, economic records, and governmental protocols that confirm the existence of sophisticated bureaucratic systems in 3rd millennium Mesopotamia. These archaeological discoveries demonstrate that Sumerian descriptions of divine territorial governance, rather than representing religious mythology, documented actual administrative structures that governed ancient civilizations through practical, bureaucratic mechanisms comparable to modern governmental systems. The Tel Beidar excavations conducted by European archaeological teams between 1992 and 2010 revealed an exceptionally well-preserved administrative archive dating to approximately 2400 BC. The archive contained over 300 tablets documenting governmental operations in a provincial city administered under the Akkadian Empire. These tablets provide unprecedented insight into practical administrative functioning at the regional level, complementing the central administrative records from major capitals like Nippur and Ur. The documents include personnel rosters listing administrative staff with their titles and responsibilities, economic accounts tracking grain distributions and livestock management, legal records documenting property disputes and criminal cases, and correspondence between local administrators and central authorities demonstrating hierarchical reporting relationships. Personnel rosters from Tel Beidar demonstrate bureaucratic organization, matching the administrative hierarchies described in texts attributing governmental structures to Anunnaki design. The tablets identify a governor exercising overall administrative authority, supported by specialized officials including an agricultural superintendent managing food production, a judicial officer administering legal proceedings, a military commander leading local defense forces, and an economic administrator overseeing taxation and resource allocation. Each official supervised staffs of assistants and scribes, creating layered hierarchies, enabling delegation while maintaining supervisory control. The organizational clarity and functional specialization evident in these documents confirms that Mesopotamian administrative descriptions recorded actual bureaucratic structures rather than idealized or mythological constructs. Economic accounts from the archive document sophisticated resource management systems employing the accounting techniques described in earlier Mesopotamian administrative texts. Monthly grain distribution records track allocations to different recipient categories including temple personnel, governmental officials, dependent workers, and military forces, with quantities calculated according to standardized ration schedules, accounting for recipient status and family size. Livestock management accounts record animal inventories by type, age, and gender, document births and deaths with explanations for mortality events, and calculate projected future herd sizes, enabling planning for breeding programs and culling decisions. These detailed accounts demonstrate that administrators employed systematic management techniques requiring mathematical competency and organizational sophistication comparable to modern business administration. Legal records preserved in the Tel Beidar archive provide evidence of judicial systems operating according to procedural safeguards and evidentiary standards described in Mesopotamian legal codes. Case documents include plaintiff complaints, defendant responses, witness testimonies, and judicial decisions following formats matching those specified in law codes attributed to divine authority. One particularly detailed case involves a property dispute where both parties presented written contracts, called supporting witnesses, and submitted to judicial examination before receiving a reasoned decision that carefully analysed conflicting evidence and applied relevant legal principles. The procedural regularity and evidentiary rigour demonstrated in these cases confirms that Mesopotamian legal systems operated according to systematic principles rather than arbitrary judicial discretion. Correspondence between Tel Beidar administrators and central imperial authorities demonstrates communication networks and hierarchical accountability systems described in texts documenting Anunnaki territorial governance. Letters from the governor to central officials report local conditions, request guidance on policy implementation, and account for revenues collected and transmitted to central treasuries. Responsive communications from central authorities provide policy directives, resolve administrative questions, and evaluate local performance. This documented correspondence confirms that regional administrators operated within coordinated hierarchical systems, maintaining central oversight while delegating operational decisions to local officials, exactly matching the governance models preserved in traditional texts. The archaeological validation provided by Tel Beidar discoveries extends beyond confirming administrative sophistication to demonstrating that ancient textual descriptions accurately documented actual bureaucratic practices. The correspondence between archaeological evidence and textual accounts indicates that Sumerian and Akkadian administrative texts should be interpreted as practical governmental documents recording real institutional structures and operational procedures rather than dismissed as mythological or propagandistic literature. This interpretive shift requires reconsidering many texts traditionally classified as religious mythology. recognizing they may preserve historical memories of administrative systems that governed early civilizations through sophisticated bureaucratic mechanisms attributed to divine design and oversight. The cumulative evidence from Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Indus Valley civilizations demonstrates that sophisticated administrative systems employing standardized procedures, hierarchical organizations, and specialized bureaucratic roles emerged during the 3rd millennium BC across multiple geographical regions. The remarkable similarities between these independent systems, including identical accounting methods, parallel organizational structures, and coordinated astronomical observations, suggest either unprecedented cultural exchanges, facilitating knowledge transfer or guidance from common sources possessing advanced governmental expertise. The ancient textual attributions of these administrative innovations to Anunnaki or comparable divine administrators provide historical frameworks explaining the otherwise inexplicable sophistication and cross-cultural consistency of early bureaucratic systems that established governmental foundations persisting through subsequent millennia of civilizational development. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound reinterpretation of early governmental development that challenges conventional historical narratives, attributing bureaucratic sophistication to gradual cultural evolution. The administrative systems documented in Mesopotamian cuneiform texts, Egyptian papyri, and Indus Valley archaeological remains demonstrate organizational complexity, mathematical precision, and cross-cultural coordination that exceed expectations for Bronze Age civilizations supposedly operating without benefit of advanced political theory or accumulated institutional experience. The detailed territorial divisions, hierarchical command structures, standardized procedures, and sophisticated resource management protocols preserved in these ancient records suggest that early governmental systems emerged not through centuries of trial and error, but through implementation of comprehensive administrative frameworks attributed by contemporary sources to divine design and oversight. The consistency of administrative principles across geographically separated civilizations, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, indicates either unprecedented knowledge exchange networks, facilitating governmental innovation transfer, or guidance from common sources possessing advanced organizational expertise. The synchronized astronomical observations, identical accounting techniques, parallel legal frameworks, and matching bureaucratic terminologies documented across these civilizations demonstrate coordination exceeding what independent cultural development would produce. The ancient textual attributions of these administrative systems to Anunnaki territorial governance or comparable divine oversight provide historical explanations for otherwise inexplicable sophistication and cross-cultural standardization that conventional scholarship struggles to account for through purely human innovation. The remarkable persistence of Mesopotamian administrative techniques through successive civilizations spanning 4 millennia demonstrates the effectiveness of knowledge preservation systems established during periods of direct divine oversight. The continuous transmission of accounting methods, organizational structures, legal principles, and bureaucratic procedures from Sumerian origins through Persian, Greek, and Roman governmental systems created institutional continuity that provided stable foundations for successive empires. Modern administrative systems, including territorial organization, hierarchical bureaucracies, standardized procedures, and systematic record-keeping trace direct lineage to innovations first documented in Mesopotamian texts attributed to Anunnaki design, suggesting that contemporary governance operates according to frameworks established during humanity's earliest civilizational experiments under divine administrative guidance. The implications of this evidence extend beyond academic historical interpretation to encompass fundamental questions about governmental legitimacy, institutional design, and the sources of political authority. If early administrative systems emerge through divine guidance rather than purely human innovation, then governmental structures preserving these frameworks inherit legitimacy from their origins in divinely designed institutions. The systematic nature of ancient bureaucracies and their proven effectiveness across millennia suggest that optimal governmental organisation follows discoverable principles rather than representing arbitrary cultural constructs subject to unlimited experimentation. Understanding the divine origins of administrative systems that continue shaping contemporary governance may provide insights enabling more effective institutional design, addressing challenges facing modern civilizations struggling with governmental dysfunction, despite technological advancement far exceeding ancient capabilities. The ancient knowledge preserved through institutional transmission and archaeological discovery offers contemporary humanity opportunities to reconnect with governmental wisdom developed during periods when divine oversight ensured administrative effectiveness and organizational coherence. The bureaucratic principles, hierarchical structures, and procedural safeguards documented in Mesopotamian texts provide proven frameworks for coordinating complex societies, managing scarce resources, administering justice, and maintaining social order across diverse populations. Recovering and implementing these time-tested administrative innovations may enable modern governments to overcome contemporary dysfunctions resulting from abandoning institutional wisdom preserved since humanity's earliest experiments in civilized governance under Anunnaki territorial administration.